May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, the one who gives us strength and the one who does redeem us. Amen. As you are seated, I invite all of our children to make their way into the chapel area for a godly play lesson. This is kickoff Sunday, and so we resume with those regular schedule of programs and events throughout the church year. So I invite all of our children to join. Most of you know Deborah England, one of our very faithful parishioners, volunteers. She wanted me to share with all of you that she wished she could be here this day, because this is ironically her favorite lectionary day in the whole church year, because this is the day that we remember all the tax collectors and sinners were coming to listen to Jesus. Deb, who's a former employee of the IRS. Rich Richardson's usually the one. Most of you know Rich. Rich is the one who, of course, I think even emails her this very week to remind her of this very unique lectionary. This is a very unique phrase. Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming together to listen to Jesus. This was one of the very first charges against Jesus. It was a charge that evidently stuck through the ministry of Jesus, because according to another gospel writer, that shortly before Jesus' crucifixion, he was reminded, oh yes, you are that one who likes to spend a lot of time with tax collectors, prostitutes, those who like to eat a lot, drink a lot. You like to hang out with those who are from the other side of the tracks, the other side of the neighborhood. You like to be with those people. And often those charges were brought up. Jesus was reminded by people who dress like I do, the Pharisees and the scribes, those fine, upstanding, they weren't churchgoers. There was no church in Jesus' time. They would go to the temple and synagogue every week. So those fine, upstanding temple goers, those fine church goers, people who knew their Bible very well, could quote the Bible, good, honest, maybe not so honest, but good people, good religious people. It seemed they always knew who was in and who was out. More to the point, they always decried who was out. 2,000 years later, and the church is still quite preoccupied with drawing that careful definition of who's in and who's out, who God likes and God doesn't like, who's acceptable to God and who's not. And so when Jesus met these folks who would grumble, and he would usually share a parable with them. And so again, this morning we hear this from the gospel, this parable about a sheep that is lost and a lost coin. Let's say you had 100 sheep and you lose one of them. In Caesar's kingdom, in the kingdom of this world, the kingdom that I spend a lot of time in, admittedly, if one sheep were lost, my first phone call would be to the accounting department. And the accounting department would quickly do a cost-benefit analysis. They would say, Tim, don't go look after that one sheep. After all, you're going to spend X amount of money on gas. You'll waste a couple of hours of your day. It's only one sheep. Hey, come on. We have 99. Our business isn't going to run very effectively if you keep chasing after that one who's lost. We have 99. Look what we have. We've determined what is an acceptable loss in our kingdom, in Caesar's kingdom. What if you had $10 and you lost $1? Are you going to go look for that $1? Are you going to spend half your day? Or will you just move on? When I asked this question last night at our service, keep in mind there were 6 middle school students in the service. And when I said this, I wasn't realizing my audience. And so when I asked them if they would go search for that $1, they all said yes. And all their parents had this immediate look, as if I were recommending them just to give money out to their children. But truthfully, perhaps sadly, if I were to misplace $1, I'm not going to spend most of my day and effort to track down that $1. It's sort of like you reaching for coins in your car and a quarter falls between the seat and the console. I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time searching for that quarter. I've learned that middle school students will. And I told them last night that their reaction actually better reflects the values of God's kingdom than mine. A number of years ago, I witnessed a wonderful godly play teacher leading a parable lesson during Vacation Bible School. Barry had told me beforehand that she had planted a coin in one of the props. And as part of this parable, she was going to talk about going in search of this coin and how precious this coin was. And so as I'm sitting in the back of the audience, I then began to see Barry's face, and I realized what's happened. Barry really has lost the coin. And with the room full of expectant children and eyes waiting for the coin to emerge, I then see Barry rifling through all the props. And 3 or 4 minutes later, as she had to improvise her lesson, 3 or 4 minutes later, Barry found the coin. Afterwards, she sort of profusely apologized for botching the lesson, and I said, no, you didn't. You actually told the parable exactly as it's meant to be heard. That you went to great effort to find this coin that was missing. That is what Jesus says God's kingdom is like. That's God's character and God's nature. Not to call the accounting department and see what is the acceptable loss and let's just move on with it. No, it's a God who takes great delight in even the one who's missing and gone astray. God takes great delight in the lost and those that are then found. 2 years ago, Martin Smith, internationally known retreat leader and author, Martin Smith, who, by the way, will lead our Shrymont Parish retreat at the end of October, Martin Smith asked this question to a room full of clergy, around 100 clergy from the Diocese of Virginia, assembled at Shrymont, and this question: do you believe that God takes great delight in you? A room full of 100 clergy went incredibly silent. To me, the tip-off that this room of clergy don't even believe that. Do you believe God takes great delight in you? We know the summation of the law quite well. Love God with all your heart and your mind and your strength. and love your neighbor as yourself. Over the years, I've suspected the reason we have trouble with that summation of the law is because we may not love our own selves. And so if you have difficulty loving who you are, it's quite a challenge to love other people. On this kickoff Sunday, as we return to wonderful music, we return to friends and a regular church schedule, we return to adult education next week, we return to Sunday school, we return to church. In the midst of all of this, in the midst of this celebration, in the midst of us going back to Sunday school, in the midst of the volunteering work that we will see when the Echo food drive bags are brought up, in the midst of all of this, I hope you remember that God takes great delight in you. God takes great delight in you. God really does. In the name of that God, amen.